And now for more, we welcome to studio David Christopher Kaufman, adjunct fellow at the Tel Aviv Institute, and still with us in studio, correspondent Nicole Zedek. And David, a welcome to the studio. We've spoken to you often via the US, but now you're here sitting with us in studio in Tel Aviv, so welcome.
Thank you very much. It's great to be here.
Your thoughts on the likability factor that we just heard there, Mike Wagenheim outlining. How crucial is it going to be, in your opinion, come November?
Yeah, I mean, Kamala Harris has done a spectacular job over the last few weeks of really rallying the nation behind her. It's fair to say she's had the almost uncritical support of the mainstream media, and they've really sort of branded her campaign as a breath of fresh air and as a moment of joy. Joy is a word that the New York Times and the Washington Post and all of the big players in the media have really used to describe Kamala Harris and her recent ascendancy to the Democratic presidential nominee. She's injected this sort of moment of hope into the nation after a very, very dark time, after all of these months of suspicion around Joe Biden. And also, she's the ultimate foil to Donald Trump, who just, despite the fact that he is in many ways more popular or authoritative on the key issues, there's something about him that folks just don't like. He has this sort of energy of kind of a nasty old man, and it's very off-putting. And more importantly, as Mike said, he cannot stick to the script. And whenever he is given the opportunity to sort of reinvent himself and offer this sense of joy that Kamala Harris is delivered, he kind of mucks it up and puts his foot in his mouth again. Vice President Harris has been quite smart in not really giving any speeches or press conferences in the last few weeks. So what's happened instead is this sort of atmosphere of excitement and joy around her, and it's really, really worked at the polls and in the numbers.
Many questions remain around the policy issues for both the Democrats and the Republicans. But from the vantage point of Israelis watching right now, the question remains the relationship between the US and Israel, specifically on the security front, obviously top of mind for Israelis as we speak. Your thoughts on what that could look like through Kamala Harris and Tim Walz?
Yeah, so I think what's most sort of concerning, this is the word I would use around this issue of policy around the United States and Israel, is that Vice President Harris has already been, she was one of the first of the leading folks in Washington, politicians, to say it was time for a ceasefire. She's used that phrase quite often, used it quite early. In December, she was already critical of Donald Trump. What we're seeing now is demands upon her. If you look at these tens of thousands of protesters who are in Chicago right now, what they want her to do is not just talk about a ceasefire, but they want an arms embargo. They want a slowdown or a complete elimination of the transfer of weapons between the United States and Israel, obviously at the one of the most precarious times, if not the most precarious moment of this war since October 7th. I don't have to tell the folks who are watching this at home, Israel's facing battles from multiple fronts, of course from Iran, but of course from the north and Hezbollah, and also needs the weapons to, as Netanyahu would say, finish the job in Gaza. So the specter of ending or reducing arms from the United States to Israel, it's very concerning and could hamper the ability of Israel to defend itself and achieve the end that it needs in order to eradicate Hamas and finish this war, however that might look.
Nicole?
I do think it'll be interesting to see, once we are actually inside the DNC, to even compare it to last month at the Republican National Convention, because outside both of these conventions, we have seen these pro-Palestinian protests. Yet inside the RNC, we saw a massive wave of support specifically for the Israeli hostages. We saw family members of the Israeli hostages speaking and getting a standing ovation from the crowd. Right now, we're not expecting to see those same remarks happening inside the DNC, with some of these family members even invited to speak. And so it should be interesting to see exactly how Kamala Harris and Tim Walz do paint exactly their narrative with everything that's happening inside Israel, especially as the Biden administration is really trying to push for this ceasefire and hostage release deal right now.
Yeah, and I think what's most sort of troublesome right now is that if you look at the Democratic Party as they're going into Chicago, they've really coalesced around Vice President Harris. There are no sticking points amongst Democrats right now. They all agree on abortion and gun control and all the big ticket issues except Israel, except Gaza, except Palestine and the Palestinians. This is the only issue that could provoke or promote divisiveness within the convention. And already we've seen Israel emerge as a flashpoint, right now, about sort of everything, everywhere, all the time, and the specter of this becoming the major flashpoint in the Democratic Convention right now, with echoes of 1968. Chicago in 1968 was the site of the famous, violence around student protests and racial protests, and they've been speaking again and again and again over the last few weeks that this could be reminiscent of 1968, but this time it would be about Israel, about Jews, about anti-Semitism. So the specter of Israel playing a central role in this convention as a point of conflict does not bode well for Israel at all, does not bode well for American Jews who find themselves already, almost a year under this, what I call tsunami of anti-Semitism, and does not really bode well for this process as well, particularly at this delicate moment where we may have a ceasefire agreement, at this delicate moment where the hostages, are more in peril than ever. The idea of Israel taking center stage at the DNC could not come at a worse time.
And of course, so many questions around dealing with that anti-Semitism that we saw, that horrific uptick on student campuses across the United States since the 7th of October. Many questions remain. David Christopher Kaufman, adjunct fellow at the Tel Aviv Institute, thank you so much for being here in studio.
Thank you.
Appreciate your time. Thank you.